All right, so now we're going to look at queues, which are another type of data stack, and they're sort of similar to stacks, except they're not last in, first out, they're first in, first out. So if we look at this little diagram here, you can see that one would have been the first one in, the first one to be what we call enqueued. And then it's going to be the first one out or dequeued, followed by two, followed by three, four, etc. So it's first in, first out. All right, so the methods that we're going to create are enqueue, so to add onto the queue, and then dequeue to pop off of the queue. And again, first in, first out. And then we're also going to have peak, which is going to look at the front. So instead of having the top of the stack, we have the front of the queue. And then length, obviously that will be just the count, how many items we have in the queue. And then is empty, true or false, if it's empty or not. So let's jump into VS Code. Now, a lot of this is going to be very similar to what we did with the stack class because it works in a similar way. So let's create a class called queue, and we're going to have a constructor because we're going to have a couple properties here. So first, of course, is the data or the items. So let's say this dot underscore items and set that to just an empty array. Then we're also going to have the count, which will be set to 0 by default, and then we'll have the front. So front is just going to represent the index of the item or the piece of data that's in the front of the queue. So to basically add on to the queue, we're going to have a method called enqueue. Okay, and then that's going to take in an item. And this is basically the same as what we did with the stack when we were adding on to the stack. You could use push, but we're going to go ahead and say this dot underscore items, and we want this dot underscore count as the index, and then set that to the item. And then, of course, we have to increment the count. So this dot underscore count plus plus. All right, so pretty simple. Now, to take the item off, remember it's the first in, first out, so whatever item's on the front is going to come off. That's going to be a function called dequeue. All right, so for that, this is going to be similar to what we did with the pop method in the stack, except the parameters of the for loop will be a little bit different because remember, it has to, the first one that enters the queue has to be the first one out. So first, let's check to see if it's empty. So I'll just quickly create it in is empty because I'm going to do this anyways. So we'll say is empty, and we just want to, all we want to do here is return this dot underscore count if that is equal to 0. All right, and then here we'll just say if is empty, or if this is empty, then let's just go ahead and return undefined. All right, and then after that, we're going to create a variable called item, and this is going to be the item that's on the front. So this dot underscore items, and then the index that we're going to use is this dot underscore front. Okay, and then we're going to have our for loop, and we want to initialize our I variable to the front. So this dot underscore front, and then we want to say as long as I is less than this dot underscore count minus 1, okay, because the count is always going to be 1 more, and we want to increment by 1, so I plus plus. Then we're going to go through and we're going to say this dot underscore items, whatever index, whatever the current iteration is going to equal this dot underscore items and then I plus 1. So what we're doing is we're shifting everything to the left. And then we want to decrement the count, so this dot underscore count minus minus, and this dot items length, so the items length is going to now equal the count, so this dot underscore count. Okay, and then we're going to return the item, and now what I want to do is add a peek method so that we can see what the front value is or what the front item is. So we're just going to first check to see if it's empty. So we'll say if this dot is empty, then we'll just return, let's just return a string that says no items in the queue. Okay, and then we'll return here. So it's going to be this dot underscore count. I'm sorry, this dot underscore items, and then we just want to get the front as the index. So this dot underscore front. All right, now let's come down here and let's create, I'll just call this queue, and let's create a new instance of our queue class. And then let's do a console log, and we'll say front item, and then this, I'm sorry, not this, queue. I want to do queue.peak. All right, so we get no items in the queue, which makes sense because we haven't added anything. So let's actually, before we do that, there's one more thing I want to add, and that's the length. So we'll just go right here and let's say length. And all we're going to do is return this dot underscore count, but I'm going to minus the front. So this dot underscore front. And then let's go under this console log and do another one, and we'll say queue length, and let's get queue dot length. Okay, so we get 0. Now let's enqueue. So we can do that by taking our queue instance and doing enqueue, and then I'm going to pass on, I'm just going to pass a string of item 1. Okay, so I get front item is item 1. Obviously, it's the only item in there. Queue length is 1. So let's add a couple more. Let's say 2 and 3. And you'll see that front item is still item 1 because it's first in, first out. So item 1 is first, right? If you can actually, if we take a look at this, item 1 was put in first, right? So it's at the front. Then item 2 was put in. Item 1 is still at the front. It basically just kind of pushed it, pushed it to the front even more. 3 was put in. So 1 is always at the front. Now, if we dequeue, so let's say queue.dequeue, you probably know what's going to happen. Now, our queue length is 2, right? Actually, what did our queue length say before? Yeah, 3. So now it's 2 because we removed 1. And remember, the first in, which was 1, was the first out when we dequeue. So now the front item is 2. Right? If I do this again, then the front item is going to be 3. And our queue length is only 1. So this is working how a queue data structure should work. Now in the next video, we're going to look at a linked list, which is quite different than a stack or a queue. You basically have each item that has a pointer to the next item. So they link together. All right, so we'll look at that next.